Welcome to the Truth and Liberty broadcast. We believe we have a mandate to bring godly change to our nation and the world through the 7 spheres or mountains of influence. To further this cause, we give away a product every week that will empower you to get involved in changing your life and changing our world. You can register for our weekly giveaway by subscribing at truthandliberty.net. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to receive weekly updates on guests, news, and much more. This is an interactive live cast, and we welcome your questions. To ask a question during the live cast, use the comment or chat features. Now get ready to dive into this week's topics with our hosts on location in Colorado, USA.
Hello and welcome to our Monday Night Truth and Liberty broadcast. We're glad that you're with us. We do this every Monday night, and tonight we have Dr. Lance Wallnau and Karen Conrad remoting in with us from the Dallas area. I've got Richard here with me. He's been with us now for a long time. He's our resident or chief lawyer or counsel or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, he's a blessing. And we are going to have a great time. I tell you, we just finished a Truth and, well, it was Truth and Liberty hosted, but it was a business summit. I guess Truth and Liberty didn't host it. No. But anyway, it was awesome. Yeah. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But we want you to participate and be a part of this. And so I'm going to turn it over to Richard, and he can tell you how you can actually participate, ask questions, and we're going to have a great time tonight.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, we're really glad you guys are watching tonight. It's going to be fantastic. You know, there's a lot of amazing stuff that's coming up here at Andrew Wommack Ministries and Charis Bible College, and I just wanted to share a little bit of that information with you. Before we get into that, though, you can participate tonight. This is an interactive process, and we hope that our viewers will participate. You can do that real easy by entering your comments or questions in the chat feature on truthandliberty.net, and we want to encourage you to watch this live cast on our website rather than on Facebook. But if you are watching on Facebook, that's great too, and you can put your comments or questions in the comment feature there on Facebook. So we hope you'll do that.
I would like to say one of the reasons we encourage you to watch on our feed is because we've been censored.
Yeah, that's right.
Anytime we mention any hot topic and stuff like that. So if you want to see the whole thing, and tonight, Dr. Lance Wallnau, he tends to be a little controversial. So we could be censored. So check it out on truthandliberty.net.
Well, coming up.
Keep him to behave. This is going to be a big job, but I think we can do it.
All right.
Well, real quick here, folks. Coming up just right around the corner is the Summer Family Bible Conference, an annual favorite here at Charis. It is awesome. You can check that out on the AWMI website. And we're going to have amazing speakers. Of course, Andrew, Barry Bennett, Greg Moore, some of the favorite teachers here at Charis Bible College, and Congressman Bob McEwen is going to be a part of the lineup, and Pastor Mark Cowart. You won't want to miss that. In July 18th through 20th, I'm excited about this one, Andrew. It's the Stand for Truth and Liberty Conference. This is the first time we've done it, but it's going to be awesome. The speakers, of course, Andrew, Bishop E.W. Jackson, David Barton, Bill Federer, Alan West, Tim Barton, Dr. Melvin Johnson, and others. It's going to be awesome. You won't want to miss that.
And Richard Harris. You skipped that one.
Well, I'm in there somewhere. I think I might be introducing somebody.
Richard is really a blessing. We haven't fully utilized him, but you'd enjoy this conference.
It's going to be great. Kingdom Youth Conference coming up in August, and Todd White is going to be ministering there. That's going to be fantastic. And then Healing is Here. I think the Healing is Here is the biggest conference as far as attendance goes, and miracles, people getting out of wheelchairs, deaf ears open, blind eyes healed, August 13th through 16th. You won't want to miss that. And then I'm going to go ahead and pitch this, even though we're several months out, but for our Colorado viewers, we're going to be holding a rally here at Charis Bible College, sponsored by Truth and Liberty. It's the In God We Trust rally, restoring faith, family, and freedom to Colorado. We're going to start fighting back here in Colorado, so I'm excited about that.
We're going to have senators, representatives speaking. We are going to be making an impact and specifically turning out the vote. For those of you that don't know, Colorado went to a totally Democratic House, Senate, and governor, and the governor is openly homosexual. And I mean, they have crammed, I couldn't even tell you, but at least 10 or more homosexual bills down our throat. And so we've got to stand up, and we would appreciate y'all's prayer And if you are in the Colorado area, certainly come and participate in that.
Amen. Well, every week on the livecast here, we give a free product away to those who've registered on our website. So I want to encourage you guys. This week's product is Harnessing Your Emotions. And so if you'll register on truthandliberty.net, not only will you receive emails and blog posts from us, but you're eligible to receive this product. And Andrew has autographed this, Harnessing Your Emotions. This is a great book.
It is.
People who are struggling with depression or all kinds of things and don't know how to get out of it, well, the keys from the Word of God are in this book. You want to get that. So, and then if you need prayer tonight, you can call in. We have prayer ministers standing by, 719-301, excuse me, that's the wrong one, 635-1111.
I was going to say,
I don't know what, that's for giving. So sorry about that. No, they didn't change it.
719-635-1111. And if you don't have an 11 on your phone, it's 719-635-1111.
So there we go.
All right.
We're ready.
And so we have Karen Conrad with us. Karen helped us start Truth and Liberty, and she was living here until she just got married, I think, back in March or April, just recently. And so Karen is with us, and she's at Lance's studio there. And then we have Dr. Lance Wallnau. Glad to have you back with us, Lance.
It's good to be back again. And look, I've seen you twice in the last 5 days. This is record setting.
And you have been blessed by it, haven't you?
I have indeed been blessed, my friend.
So, Lance, for those that don't know you, we could give a lot of things, but one of the things that you were emphasizing at the business summit that we just had was that you were the one who called out Trump as the Cyrus candidate that was going to be like a wrecking ball. And I think you prophesied that back in 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And people thought you were... They thought you were crazy, but then Netanyahu comes along and does the exact same thing and confirmed what you were saying.
Absolutely. And you were a large part of my notoriety when the left picked up on me, because you, without even meeting, you liked the video and sent it off to your pastor's network. Next thing I know, I start really getting stalked by people. It was a lot of fun. But I called it on Cyrus and Trump derangement syndrome. I predicted the term before the election.
And so you have a book out on the chaos candidate. Tell about the books that you've written.
Yeah, right. Well, unlike Andrew, who has more than one book, I only have one book. And it's God's Chaos Candidate, which will be updated for this election cycle, which will be God's Chaos President. As you can imagine, it's part 2. And
Lance, you have access to the president. You've been an advisor. I guess you got to meet him because you had made this prophecy, and so that connected you before he became president. And since then, he's used you, and you've had some access to him. You have access to a lot of things that are going on in our nation. And so for the people who are viewing tonight, I'd kind of like to start by maybe having you just give us an update. Where do you think we are in this process? Are we winning or losing? What's happening?
Well, already what you have is the beginning of the blitzkrieg of bad polling. So many believers out there, which by the way, is going to have a reverse effect, because the more that Trump supporters see that the polls look like he's losing against, I mean, when you've got him losing against Beto and Elizabeth Warren, you know the polling data is bad.
Yeah.
But I ran across, so all the polls are bad. What the president's doing now is we got to pray for him, because he's got people that are trying to talk to him about how to be presidential. And he is making an effort now to go into his reelection era. And we just don't want it to change. And I'm sorry. I mean, I run into people, and so do you. These are Christians who say, "Oh, I just wish he didn't tweet the way he does." It's like all of our sensibilities are embarrassed by his style. But I say, if God's going to give you a Samson, let Samson be Samson. I mean, the guy's going to use a club. He's not going to be using, something more elegant. So the polling data is going to hit us sideways up until the election. Then it'll be a meltdown as to how they could have got the polling wrong again. And the proof of that, Andrew, isn't in the United States. It's in Australia, where we just watched an election cycle where a Christian conservative was running, and the polling was against him, and he ended up winning. And this happened in the Brexit. This happens in Israel. Every time Netanyahu runs, he has challenges getting a coalition together. But they're always predicting conservatives can't win and they're losing till they win. And so I think that Trump is up against fake news polling. And he fired somebody inside his staff because they were actually tracking data from the Democrat sources. So he said, no, he said, he's going to go with this guy, Brett Pascal, the guy that helped get him elected, is in charge of his campaign. They've got internal data, and their internal data says they're on track. But he's up against this media machine that won't give him a free pass like they did in 2015, Karen. They're going to try to stop him. They're going to give him a moment's breath.
It's true. And there's concerns about the polling, actually voting, when people go into that too. Can you explain that? I think that's really helpful for people to understand the seriousness of that.
Yeah, because I was talking with some people about, well, what's going to happen? So forget the polling. Suppose we're able to get the turnout and Trump wins. They said it isn't even winning. That is a big concern for a lot of people, Andrew. The real concern, and Richard, you could take a look at this, is that the electronic polling, because everything's digital. So the polling booths, polling device, about 30% of them are electronically monitored. That means that someone can come in with a laptop into the voting area under the guise of being there, let's say, for the Democrats to make sure that everything's running right. And they take that computer home and anything can be adjusted in terms of digital wireless monitoring. And they can move a gap of 300 votes down to 100, down to 50, down to a 1%, 1%, until they know they've got enough ballots coming in, maybe in a box somewhere found in a trunk, that's going to shift it over, over the margin. And that is the big concern that we're broadcasting it now because we want the left to know the research and the heat is coming down on violating the polling laws, and the machines are not going to be wirelessly rigged to be manipulated.
But it's not only polling. We just had somebody explain to me ballot harvesting. And I mean, the Democrats are actually generating votes and stuff. How do you overcome this? It sounds like it's widespread. It's literally all across the nation.
Well,
yeah.
the Democrats.
When I say polling, I mean in the voting. I'm talking about where the voting is taking place.
Yeah. So that's what you were talking about.
Yeah. Well, the Democrats have been good. They're so better skilled at manipulating elections. Republicans.
That's because they're dishonest.
And experienced.
They don't have the same boundaries that we do. And I know that some people may think that, man, you shouldn't be advocating Republican, Democrat. But you know what? If you look at the Democrat, their platform, it is as anti-God as any platform we've ever had. And you look at the Republican platform, it is one of the most godly platforms we've ever had. I'm not Republican or Democrat. I'm a Christian. But as long as the Democrats line up against God and even vote for infanticide and all of the things that they're doing, I guarantee you I don't have a qualm one about speaking out against it. We've got to stop this.
The both parties' platforms from 2016 are on our Truth and Liberty website. And folks, you can get on there and download those and print them off, use them, talk to your family and friends about it. It's out there for the world to see.
So, Lance, let me ask you that what are some of the strengths of Trump? Like, I could name a few, but I imagine that you probably could just name a number of things. I mean, Trump has probably kept his word and has done more godly things than any president I'm aware of in my lifetime.
Yeah, literally, we could run a scroll right now of the decisions he's made that, just one after another that have been decisive for anyone who's even a novice in politics. A lot of us are new to this. And to your point, Andrew, the platforms even concern me a little bit because we know like David Barton and Tony Perkins, they had a hand in shaping the Republican platform. But then you look when the Republicans were in Congress and they got the Senate, they did nothing. And then you turn around and you look at when the Democrats have just the Congress, the whole nation is in an investigative upheaval. There was no upheaval when the Republicans had the Congress. They should have been investigating the fraudulent investigation.
Absolutely.
They were a bunch of mutes. So I would go so far to say that the Republicans are shrewd enough to give us a platform they won't deliver on. The Democrats are shrewd enough to know that they're going to go for the rest of the country that doesn't agree with the Republican platform. And Donald Trump comes into the middle and says, wink, wink, nod, nod, I'm really a populist. I'm here to make America great, not make the Republican Party or the Democratic Party great. 'Cause I think the system's rigged and it's a swamp out here. So Trump actually represents us. But the thing about Donald Trump that I wish Christians would understand, and this is going to be our mission, Andrew, this year, is to identify the 34 million Christians who are registered to vote, who do not vote, because the fate of America, their children, and probably Western civilization in our lifetime is going to be affected by whether or not Christians actually show up and use their God-given authority to make a no be a no and a yes be a yes. Because if we do this right, we can not only put the president still in the role of holding back the darkness, but we can then spin around and start to pick off those compromising, weak people that sign off on a platform but will not vote in favor of it.
Yeah, I believe that there were a lot of Republicans when we were in control who were Republicans in name only.
Right.
And, you know, this is one of the reasons that I believe that the House went Democratic is because, and again, I may get some of these figures wrong, but you can correct me, but there was like 60 Republicans that retired, that lost their seats. They just quit. And, of course, that left us more vulnerable. And what we did was get rid of a bunch of the rhinos. But we need to gain back the House. I tell you, the House right now with Nancy Pelosi, it is just delay, obstruct tactics. There is nothing has been put forth except the Equality Act. They passed that, and praise God. I don't believe that's ever going to get any traction in the Senate. But they are doing nothing. Matter of fact, I saw a report today that Biden said unless the Democrats can learn to compromise on some things and do something, they might as well go home. They aren't accomplishing a thing.
Yeah.
Said that.
Joe Biden said that. I got to catch up on my news cycle. You're ahead of me on that one.
Yeah,
That's
I
good.
read that on my phone just a few minutes ago. But and I'm sure that he spun it some way that was against the Republicans. But nonetheless, it was an absolutely true statement.
Absolutely right.
So, you know, Lance, you said we have to capture the 34 to 40 million. What is it going to take to, in your opinion, to activate those voters that are just kind of sitting on the sidelines? What do we need to do?
I think Andrew and me and all of the people that have an audience, I think we need to maybe away from the cameras, start to talk to each other
There you go.
and talk about the stewardship of the nation on our watch. Because all we really have to do is out of that 34 to 37 million dormant believers that are registered to vote but don't vote, if we could get maybe 5 million of them, 5 million that would care enough about America to be informed and use their authority to vote, I believe they would make the decisive difference in 10 or 11 battleground states. Now, they're spread out all over the country.
Yeah.
But in those battleground states, I think their turnout could turn out the Electoral College for the upset that would repeat history so we can have an extension of grace. But even then, we're not going to be spectators watching the news cycle while the president's batting back the intelligence agencies and the media and the corrupt politicians. We're going to have to get more engaged in drawing a perimeter around protecting America in the future. But it starts with, I believe, the believers, the leaders, beginning to call each other into accountability for the future we're authorizing on our watch.
And it sounds like from a strategy of certain states, which we have seen from the liberals for absolutely years. So coming together in those states. And then, Lance, can you share too about the high percentage of voters we expect to turn out in 2020? I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I'll get you, Andrew. I'll get something for Truth and Liberty, which would be a special graphic that I just reviewed in a private meeting. And what it showed was statistically, you have like 40% of the country shows up for midterms. Well, and this is a trend, you can see a trend line. All of a sudden, boom, in our last midterms, Karen, it went up to like 50-some%. And they said that 56% turnout was presidential level turnout. Now, the Democrats were better at doing what? Utilizing the media to traumatize, agitate, and mobilize the door knocking that brought out the difference decisively, particularly where women are concerned in urban communities, right, around the cities. But what nobody's calculated yet is if the midterms could produce presidential turnout, what will the next presidential cycle produce? Will it be the 56 to 60%? No, it will be 70%. We are going to see the most heated up, probably not since the Civil War, the dawn of the Civil War, will you see so much aggregate and intense engagement in a political contest, because the winner of this contest is going to probably come in with 70% of the United States voting for or against them. And I hate to say it, we might celebrate a Trump victory and we'll beat the odds. But you know, the day after that, if the left had a meltdown the first time,
Yeah.
can you imagine how we're going to have to brace ourselves for impact and get our flotation devices ready if Trump does it twice?
You know, I believe that everybody agrees, even the liberals, that the evangelical turnout is what swung the elections in 2016. And because of that, the liberals just hit the roof. And that's the reason that they had such a huge turnout in 2018. The liberals turned out, and they are certainly motivated. They hate Trump. And if we don't get these evangelical Christians to turn out and vote, man, we could lose the ground that we've gained. And I think that one thing that Trump has done very effectively is he has exposed the liberal agenda. They love to present themselves, you know, they take terminology like we are pro-choice, we are for women, when the truth is, man, it is all about abortion, is about making money, and we could spend the rest of the program talking about that. But anyway, they have co-opted the terminology and present themselves, but Trump has stripped it. Now they're passing these bills where they will even kill a child after it's born, completely separate from the mother's body. There's no way they can claim that this is a woman's body. And they have been exposed, and unless the evangelicals turn out, get motivated again, we could lose everything.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot at stake in this election.
Absolutely.
Right?
Go ahead, Richard.
Oh, well, the whole life agenda, the abortion issue, we're finally, after decades, we're on the verge of possibly rescinding Roe versus Wade, and we just need one more justice, I think, to retire and Trump get a solid pro-life candidate in there, and we might actually see Roe versus Wade rescinded.
Did you know Clarence Thomas said today that he was talking, I forget the exact quote, but he was talking about that we need to quit these judging everything by precedent and go back to the Constitution. And immediately the liberals said this is laying the groundwork for the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So.
Imagine going back to the Constitution.
What?
It would be
What?
so controversial.
Going back to the original intent?
What a shocking idea.
And you know what really motivated most believers, I think, in 2016 was the fact that we had possibility for 2 Supreme Court justices. They saw how important that was, and that's what turned them out. But even though we've gained great ground there, not only with the Supreme Court, but all of the appellate court judges and stuff, we've got the right to life, the Equality Act, the border issue. I mean, if the liberals have their way, they're going to open the border, and I mean, there will be an influx of everything.
And far be it from me to say this controversial statement on a broadcast. But there is maybe one particular I'm thinking of, Supreme Court justice, who's been holding on purely out of the, I think, the anxiety of the left on what would happen if this justice was suddenly to step down for health reasons. Remember, this is an aging constituency. So there could be a vacancy or a need to fill one before November. It was Scalia that was the missing piece in the last election. And this only works in our favor from now until the election day, because The Supreme Court is not really a Supreme Court. It's an extension of two political ideologies.
Right.
The unfortunate thing is Democrats always vote consistently, whether it's in Congress or in the Supreme Court, and Republicans have a tendency to march to the beat of their own drummer. So you actually have to have an extra one or two on there to even survive.
Yeah. And you know, there's a lot of issues that are important, but I really believe that the pro-life issue is going to be at the forefront, and this ought to motivate evangelicals to get out. I heard Kenneth Copeland on election night say it this way. He said, if you vote for a candidate that is pro-abortion, you are an accessory to murder. And you know, that is absolutely true. And I think that this is going to be one of the major issues, because would anybody have believed that just 2 years ago we would have states be voting against all abortion? Louisiana just closed down the last Planned Parenthood thing. Texas is making laws against cities supporting Planned Parenthood. We have seen a tsunami come against this culture of death, and it is polarizing the nation, and I think it's going to be the #1 issue that turns people out.
I agree, because the young people really, for the most part, are pro-life, but also, and Andrew said this before, that their true colors are showing now with what they passed in New York. And so this was an issue that people could kind of say, okay, yeah, this is women's rights, because it really wasn't like a full-term baby. They went over the top, which the enemy always does, and I think it is going to help us tremendously.
Yes, they call this reproductive rights, as opposed to abortion on demand as an issue. What bothers me is, Andrew, that so many of these issues we can win if we can articulate and tell the story, because the truth is they have to cover up a ghastly crime. What we have to do is expose the truth. You said it, even with Donald Trump, exposing what the left is doing. It's a warfare for us that we ought to be able to win, because they're the ones that have to hide things in darkness. We're the ones that only have to clarify the truth.
And I've heard many people make the correlation between slavery in the 1860s and abortion now. It's the same issue, and Christians were silent on that for whatever reason, because of, you know, the economics of the South and things like this. But man, you look back on it and it was just totally immoral, and everybody agrees. Someday, I believe that this nation is going to look back, and any Christian who supports abortion is going to be looked at as being immoral. I think that this tide is turning.
And just not to exhaust this subject, but to Karen's point, millennials are not with us in so many areas because of the culture, really, we've given them. So in marriage, gender, you know, gay rights, climate, they're not in our camp. But when it comes to this issue, this is especially where the left has a problem, because millennials are actually not liking the idea of abortion. And here's the secret sauce. In the slavery issue, you could see it. And if you were in the North, you'd hear about it. But it was when photography started coming out that you could look at things and realize they were worse than you thought. It's 3D scanning imagery right now. That is the weapon we've got. Because you can scan a woman's belly and see the complete contours in 360 of the forming of a baby from the 5th month, 6th month, 7th month, 8th month. And once a person sees the three-dimensional reality of what is under the skin, it becomes a ghastly realization to then cope with the idea that somebody's legitimizing the death of that person.
It'll tie it to the social justice issue, which is really big in our young people. They're very big on social justice.
And you know, the movie that came out, Unplanned, I think that was just excellent. We took 250 of our employees to that rented 2 theaters, showed it. And then we had Abby Johnson on our Truth and Liberty broadcast. And I tell you, that has impacted a lot of people.
And you know, there's another pro-life movie coming out called Roe versus Wade, and I think John Voight is going to star in it as one of the Supreme Court justices. And I'm excited about that. I don't know what the release date is, but I think it's next year sometime, and that may just be the thing that tips the scale. So, you know, Lance, your point is actually a great one. Historically, there was a photograph that aired in Harper's Weekly, I think, back in the 1850s, late 1850s, somewhere, of a man, a slave, and his back was completely shredded by the slaveholder's whip. And the graphic nature of that picture transformed public opinion in the North. And I think ultrasounds and these pro-life films that are exposing the abortion industry, they're having the same impact.
You know, I wouldn't have believed that 4 years ago that we would be seeing what we're seeing. We are seeing a huge boldness in this area of pro-life, and I really believe it's an answer to prayer, and God has given us an opportunity, and man, we're just using this broadcast to tell you that you not only need to vote, but you need to become an activist. You need to get out and start influencing people. Lance and I are doing that. Karen, Richard, we're using everything we can, and this isn't only for a few people. This is every born-again believer. You influence people that I'll never influence. I don't care how much I spend on television or something. Every one of us needs to get out and do our part. And I tell you, I think we've got a window of opportunity. If we squander this, I don't know why God should ever give us another opportunity.
Yeah,
it's that important.
Well, Lance, I'd like to get your take on something else that I think is a growing issue, a growing concern, but is the threat that the LGBT and radical progressive movement is posing to freedom of conscience and freedom of speech right now. We just saw that a guy was arrested in the United States of America out in Spokane, Washington, for simply protesting against transgender men coming in and reading to our children in a public library. A preacher was arrested in Toronto a couple weeks ago for preaching the gospel, not insulting people or anything, but just telling people they can get saved in an LGBT neighborhood. I tell you, it's getting serious.
And it would have an immediate backlash if we had a better echo chamber in the body of Christ for us to recognize how, you know, the Bible says about that we should identify with those who are imprisoned as though we were in prison ourselves, or to recognize that we are with other people that are suffering affliction. We should be identifying with every courageous Christian. I'm reading the headlines here. For Christian florist who refused to work gay wedding loses again in Washington court. So the Washington Supreme Court has again ruled against a Christian grandma and florist, Barnell Stutzman, who faces the risk of crippling fines for refusing to create floral arrangements for a same-sex wedding. Now, in Colorado, where you guys are, you have the
Jack
Phillips case, where Phillips was accused of violating Colorado's discrimination law for refusing to bake a same-sex wedding cake. The Supreme Court asked the Washington High Court to consider whether or not there was any animus against the florist's religious beliefs when the lower courts ruled against Stutzman previously. The court found in the Phillips case that the Colorado government had clearly displayed religious hostility to a Christian baker's belief on marriage and sexuality. You could say that sometimes the enemy is allowed to expose himself, because in unmasking, even the courts themselves have to say, this isn't even a political issue. This is a personal hostility to Christian issue.
And so Jack Phillips won that case at the Supreme Court, but then the Civil Rights Commission in Colorado came back and sued him again. This time he countersued and made them back down, and it was just yesterday, I think, or today, that they filed a new thing against him.
Third lawsuit.
He's under a lawsuit again.
It's a third lawsuit, and it's a transgender woman. Now catch this, it's just so obvious. If it isn't going to be lesbian or gay, it's going to be transgender. They're going to keep, this isn't accidental. This isn't like this guy is picking a fight. They are targeting, and they've got lawyers and money, so they don't care. This is people going in to look for a reason to sue you. And so that alone ought to be a case that should be targeting independent citizens for the purpose of litigation. Is actually, you have to talk to me, Richard. What does it mean to have something where it's fraud in the inducement? What does that term mean?
Fraud in the inducement is a contract defense, which says that when someone induces you to sign a contract through fraud or deception, then you can invalidate that contract.
Okay, so I think we really have to start to explore where people are actually being set up for lawsuits in these cases. So in the Phillips case last Wednesday, in Denver, Colorado, you have the third lawsuit, and it's Colorado because it is an activist state run by activists that are national activists who flipped Colorado and plan on doing that in about 11 other states right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the thing that people across the country need to understand is that what's happened in Colorado, that's the Democrat liberal agenda for the entire country. This Equality Act that passed the House of Representatives, the United States House, with 8 Republican votes in favor, so all the Democrats plus 8 rhinos switch over, would do exactly the same thing to the entire country, the same law. So if life doesn't motivate you and your freedom of conscience and religion doesn't motivate you to get out to the polls, well, then you deserve to lose your liberty.
And I believe that the majority of people watching this, they are opposed to those things, but somehow or another they think that they can't speak out on this. If you are voting for a Democrat, you are selling this nation down the tubes. And I know that a lot of people think I'm extreme, but I believe that that's absolutely true. And you are a part of the problem if you're voting Democrat. And Lance, I read about this pastor that was arrested today for protesting the drag queens reading to their children. And the drag queens were saying that if Jesus was here, he wore a dress and he would be reading to the children. And we're preaching love, you're preaching hate. They have somehow or another turned this around to where if you say that teaching young people that transgenderism, homosexuality, if you say that that's not right, that you're somehow or another a hate person. How do you deal with that, Lance?
Yes, well, in the beginning, Jesus said he made them male and female. So the very fact that they would have somebody who's a drag queen or a transgender teaching, let alone quoting Jesus, opens them up to the idea of teaching religion. We should be asking for equal time on the basis of them teaching about Jesus, that we want to teach about Jesus from a uniquely biblical Christian perspective.
That's a
I like that one.
They're going to get religious. Let's get religious.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, we need to
We're
go
going to get them, Andrew. We're going to get them, I tell you.
Amen. So let's go to some questions here so that we can have a little bit of time to respond to these questions.
All right. Well, we've got some good ones coming in here. The first one here is from VA on chat. And the question is, what does Lance see about this circus of Democrat candidates? It truly does look like a circus from time to time. What's your take on this field of Democrats, Lance?
It really is delightful. I so thank God for Joe Biden, because you see, here's what's going on behind the scenes. The Democrats have been taken over by Colorado. Let's put it this way. The Colorado blueprint, everyone needs to get it. I found the book at Charis Bible College. A student introduced me to it. It is how the strategy of billionaires, millionaires, gay rights, and Democrat activists were able to put together a coalition of activists. Colorado at that point was focused on the family and new life with the National Evangelical Association with Ted Haggard. It was the home of Peter Wagner and a National Prayer Center and all kinds of beautiful things. And they made it the target. They knew if they could flip Colorado, they could flip any place. They flipped it in one shocking election cycle. And then they took over the Democratic Party by doing a meeting in Denver, exposing their strategy to Barack Obama and all his donors, and they all signed off on it. And then we had 8 years of activists. It's called Thunder Road, a blueprint of combining wealth, activism, media, lawyers who sue you, opposition researchers who expose you, and politicians. They put this cauldron together. And now the whole nation is rocking on it with these issues, LGBTQ issues like we got right now. Now, why I like the candidates is for this reason. Since the Democratic Party got hijacked by the left, all of the candidates have to kiss the ring of insanity in order to get the head nod from the wild wackies on the left that are running the party. The smart people, the Pelosi's and the Obamas, believe it or not, and the inside the Beltway money Democrats, they're huddling, going, it's one thing to be able to move the nation incrementally towards socialism, but Ocasio-Cortez and these guys are nuts. And so within their own party, they're saying, we know that we'd have a little takeover here, but we're not going to win with Trump if they run the campaign because they're going to put up nut jobs. So they make Biden go in. And Howard Schultz was the first one, and they shot him. CEO of Starbucks, done. He didn't last a week. Biden comes in with a nod and a wink from Obama in the background. He's got major influence in the party still. And so Biden comes in, basically says, hey, we're not going to win this unless we at least look like we're normal. So Biden is the face of normalcy while all the circus is behind him. And now whether or not he can survive will be fascinating, because remember the Hyde Amendment? He comes out and makes a statement because he knows Hyde. He knows he's been around for so long. He's like, my God, he's in his 80s. He says, oh, no, I think we can live with the Hyde Amendment. And within 24 hours, the radical left gets him saying, no. He says, well, I changed my mind on that. We can't. I'm up for it. So he's under the influence of the heat from the crazy left. It's only going to get worse. I'm going to almost have to predict there's an internal fight right now because the smart Democrats are saying we can't win with a nut. And Sanders may raise a whole lot of raise a cloud formation. But when the Wall Street market gets a whiff of what Bernie Sanders' presidency looks like, you're going to see a whole lot of union workers, a whole lot of manufacturer, a whole lot of Rust Belt Democrats backing up from the crazy socialists and going for Trump. So it's quite frankly, it's more entertaining than it is alarming, because I'm watching Biden get piecemealed to death by the crazy part of his own party.
I read an article that they figured out if Sanders' agenda was put forward with the free tuition, health care, on and on it goes, that it would cost every taxpayer in the United States $25,000 in new taxes.
Wow.
If people, I tell you, I'm looking forward. I think Trump is going to have these guys for lunch when they get into a debate with him.
I think awesome. That's right.
The only problem with Donald Trump is, and this is the data I ran into this week, is that nobody can energize the base. No Republicans ever energized the base like Donald Trump. The problem is he energizes 2% more opposition than any other Republican. So
it negates it a little bit.
He's negated by the fact that he gets his enemies so mad that they get more intense.
And to that point, the liberals literally they hate Trump so much, they are going to turn out en masse. And if for some reason the Christians don't respond, man, we could lose this. That'd be a shame.
Well, that's why they're continuing to beat this impeachment drum. They don't. Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to actually do it, but they want to keep those investigations going so they can keep their base stirred up. Lance, do you see any real possibility of impeachment?
No. The stupidest thing they could ever do. It's giving, and even them, you know what they're saying? Trump is trying to bait us into it. It's almost like, you know where it is? Like, I hate to say this because everything's been politicized, but Robert E. Lee during the Civil War, he was so good at what he did until he finally had to I guess God had to kill Stonewall Jackson. He had to start taking out Southern generals because, as my dad said, it was from Richmond. He said the South had the better military men, the North had the industry.
Absolutely.
But, Andrew, absolutely. I knew you'd say that.
No, I'm not saying that as a Southerner, but I mean, I've read a lot of Civil War history, and I mean, the South could have won the war numerous times, and there was supernatural things that happened. One time they discovered the plans that Lee had, and it was found in a little roll of paper, and it thwarted
with cigars,
yeah,
wrapped in a special, and given to McClellan. the general of the Union Army, and he didn't act on it.
I read Robert E. Lee's biography, and I mean, it was supernatural, the things that happened to thwart the South from winning. God was in that, or they would have won.
And that's the reason I'm bringing him up. So back to Trump. Robert E. Lee had so invaded the psyche of Northern generals after defeating McClellan, and then, you know, he defeated Burnsides, and then in Chancellorsville, Hancock, and then that when Grant took over the Army of the Potomac and took over the campaign, his generals and officers were coming to him all nervous about Bobby Lee's over here, Bobby Lee's over there. And finally, Grant, this is his great genius, he took his cigar out of his mouth, he spat, and he said, Bobby Lee here, Bobby Lee there. You know, you'd almost think he's going to do a somersault right over the Union Army and end up on our flank. Why don't you stop telling me what Bobby Lee's going to do to you, and you tell me what you're doing to Bobby Lee?
Amen.
There you go.
That was the moment that the belief system, talk about faith, of the North changed, because a general was found who said he's not superhuman, he's beatable. It's in the arithmetic, and I'll beat him.
Amen.
Donald Trump is the Bobby Lee of politicians.
Let's go to another question here.
All right, Lance, here's another question. This one's good. Do you think that do you think the tables are turning on the anti-Trump conspiracy inside the CIA and the FBI?
You wait till Barr's investigation comes out and his Connecticut investigation comes out. It'll be like the footfalls of an opera, kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. Going right into 2020, you're going to see as the months go by, the research is coming out, and it's going to expose, I believe, John Brenner as being the chief architect behind the setting up of utilizing foreign agents from Australia to Great Britain in order to set up Papadopoulos, which was the premise predicating the use of the FISA warrants to spy on the Trump family and campaign. And I think you're going to start to see Comey and Brenner start to turn against each other. And at the moment that we have and Trump has, the president has released it, the moment we have the manuscripts unredacted that are the paper trail, which will come out with Bob Barr's report, then you're going to see chaos in the ranks, because for an objective person, there's going to be substantial evidence that the intelligence communities were in collusion in order to create an invasion of a candidate and his surveillance of an opposition party.
Well, again, today I saw that there were 15 people associated with Hillary Clinton's emails that the report came out today and said that they are guilty of numerous violations. So we're beginning to see some of that thing happen, and I believe it could make a huge difference.
Yeah, and that'll be interesting fodder for questions of Joe Biden, since all that took place during the Obama administration and he was vice president at the time.
Yeah,
That's a great point, Richard.
Well, so we got another question here. There's a question from guest 6220 on chat. The Electoral College status in some states will go to the national winner. Comment. I think they're referring to this national popular vote compact that's taken place. Lance, do you have any knowledge about that? Any update on where that stands?
As long as we've got control of the Senate, there's not going to be a referendum that's going to take place in this election cycle, changing the Electoral College. But just goes to show how Democrats are like the mob in this sense, that they are going to make sure they win by opening borders to flood America with illegal voters who are all going to vote socialist. Or they're going to pack the Supreme Court with enough justices so that you'll never get a majority. Or they're going to eliminate the Electoral College so that you'll never get a Republican. Or they're going to reconfigure every county in the United States so as to give them an electoral advantage and be able to wipe out the Republicans. I'll tell you something. Those are 4 plans they are executing in addition to voter fraud, which is the wireless thing we're talking about. And those are all the ways in which they are working to take power. Reminds me of Lindsey Graham's moment in the Kavanaugh hearings when he just sat back and here's a friend of all these senators said, you people sure do want power. Man, do you want power? Well, I pray to God you never get it. Because these people have a lust for power like a heroin addict or a drug addict has for crack. And the problem with conservatives and Christians, as you well know, is they simply are apathetic. Well, in a sense, the more spiritual you are in a safe country, in a period of peace, the less involved you are. And so the very blessing of God creates an anesthesia on anxiety in people when you really should be watching carefully for the thief that is trying to break in at night. So right now you've got those 4 legal pathways and 1 illegal, and Democrats are committed to all 5 strategies. How many strategies are we committed to?
And let me point out that the Electoral College thing, Colorado voted for the popular vote, but it's dependent upon enough states adopting that same thing. If you don't get a certain number of states, and then the Senate, the Congress has to help and pass it. So anyway, that's not going to be a factor in this election cycle, regardless of what some individual states have done.
Right.
So you say Congress has to pass it?
Well, I know that there has to be a number of states. There has to be a certain number of states. Can you explain this?
Sure. Yeah, so it's called a National Popular Vote Compact, and so it doesn't kick in. Colorado's passed it. I think 14, 15 other states have passed it, but it doesn't actually take effect until enough states that hold 270 electoral votes pass the compact, and then they're all bound by it. And then it becomes binding in those states. And it requires that those electoral votes of those states go to whoever wins the national popular vote. So that's how it's going to work. Right now, I don't think they're up to 270, but...
and does the Congress have to okay that?
I don't believe so, because this is not an amendment of the Constitution, and that's the problem, is they're taking an end around the Constitution to eliminate the election.
Each state could choose to do their voting as they choose if they get enough.
That's the theory behind it. I'm sure it'll be challenged, but we're not confident in the outcome of a court challenge on that deal. So
we got time for one more question here.
There's a great article for you guys on that, which is in the Harvard Law Review on the danger of the National Popular Vote Compact by Norman Williams. And you can read it in the Harvard Law Review, where they discuss exactly why it's problematic to go in that direction. And I'm glad to see that the Harvard Law Review actually has somebody that's thinking in their right mind.
I tell you, the genius of our founding fathers with the Electoral College is just awesome, because if they didn't have that, well, then Colorado would basically just be a non-factor. It would only be New York and California that would decide everything, and all of the rest of these states would just be left out.
And I guarantee that if that was to happen and we had a revival and suddenly the popular vote was in a great awakening, voting Christian, they'd be going back to the Electoral College.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we've got one more question here, and that is from Hurley54 on chat. And this viewer asks, how do I begin being an activist for this election season?
That's a great question.
That's a very good question. It's a very practical one. First thing you want to do is you want to get in touch with your state party. You want to get in touch. It's terrible how the Republicans are they don't even have, the RNC doesn't even have an infrastructure. You want to get in touch with your state party, and you want to get in touch with your own district representation and start tracking with the elections that are happening. And we'll come back on the broadcast too and give you guys some apps you can use, because I'm amazed at school boards, city councils, local mayor races. They are all political races, and you need to know who is there. I remember I was shocked like a year ago. I'm in Southlake. I'm in the megachurch capital of Texas, and it was like I think it was a mayor that got elected. Or it was a Muslim that got elected to a significant position within our own community, and the Christians were completely oblivious to it because nobody was looking at how thoroughly Democrats are seeking to get control at the state and local election level. So you want to start with your own state and your own locale, and it's just a simple Google search. Same way you ask that question is how you go online and you find out where your state party is, your county, and you start to mobilize. And you've got information right here you can work with. And also you got Tea Party Patriots, which are in various states, which is the holdovers for the Tea Party. They got a couple of million people still keeping the fires burning.
Well, here in Colorado, the Democrats took over, and they did it by not just going for the national elections or even the state elections. They did it on the local level. And they just passed this bill 1032, which allows them to teach sex education in very perverted ways and forbids morality being taught, only perversion. But the caveat to that is that Colorado is a local controlled state. And if we were to take over the school board, the local school board can trump whatever is passed at the state level. And so
the local school board is the one that's allowing a transvestite to come in and teach about Jesus.
That's right.
Yep. Well, we're just about out of time. And you know what? We have CTN that broadcasts this. Thank you, CTN, for doing that and carrying this on all of your networks. But because of that, we have to end at an exact time. So we've just got 1 minute left. But Lance and Karen, thank you again for being with us. And man, we're believing that these broadcasts are making a difference and that people are getting activated and involved. And so for all of you watching, thank you for being with us. We do this every Monday night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and we've had on politicians, we've had on generals, we've had on all kinds of people. We had Abby Johnson that was with that Unplanned. It's just a great way for you to keep informed about what's happening, so we encourage you to check it out every Monday night at 6 p.m., and we're going to be here sharing some things that I believe are going to make a difference in our nation. So Lance, thank you for being with us. Thanks, Karen. You guys are blessings.
Thank you. Thank you. And quick plug, a movie, Emmanuel. All of you look it up online. It's playing for 48 hours. It's, I believe, a Christian movie on the Charlottesville church shooting.
We got to go. We love you. Goodbye. See you next week.
Join us next time for the Truth and Liberty broadcast. Find tonight's episode and related articles and links at truthandliberty.net. Truth and Liberty is viewer supported. If you'd like to help us continue our live casts, you can make a donation at truthandliberty.net or by calling our phone center at 719-635-1111. Our prayer ministers are there to help you with your donations and to pray with you.
We could hear really well tonight. Sometimes they forget. Why only 48 hours?